definition. And we are live in full high definition 1080i. I hope that everyone is having a good week. I hear it's cold in the Rockies. It's hot in the East Coast. It's like 80 in Roanoke, and it's in the 60s here in Vermont today, and it was in the 70s over the weekend. So it's crazy weather. Nice being outside, but it's a little scary it being so warm this time of year. Anyway, I'm gonna just sit here and jabber for a couple minutes until people get in and say hi. And if you have never been to one of our Monday fly tying events, welcome. We like to have fun here. We like to get great questions, and there are probably going to be a lot of questions about this one today because it's a different kind of fly than I've tied before. So welcome. If you're new, give us a shout there in the comments. Let us know if this is your first fly tying Monday. And by the way, big news. My friend and once a month nemesis, Tim Flagler, has won the coveted Fly Tyer of the Year award from Fly Tyer magazine. And that's really, really well deserved. Tim is one of the greatest, and both as an educator and as a tyer. And I'm honored to go head to head with Tim once a month and enjoy it. But he really deserves that Fly Tyer of the Year. So if you do follow him on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or you're going to the International Fly Tying Symposium this weekend, make sure you congratulate Tim. And by the way, Tim and I are going live head to head this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, at the International Fly Tying Symposium in Somerset, New Jersey. I'm also teaching some classes there. Saturday class on nymphs and soft hackles, three of my designs, and then Sunday morning on dry flies, again, 3 of my patterns. And I think there are still some spots open. So if you're going to the Fly Tying Symposium and you want to come to a private fly tying class with me, sign up. They're not free. They're not free. They're run by the people that run the show, but and they're limited to 10 people per session. So if you're interested in that, sign up. And if you're not, and you go to Somerset, please say hi and especially congratulate Tim. So I think we got a lot of people here.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Don't forget to mention your live tie-off with Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Symposium.
And Tim and I are also doing a live tie-off both days, Saturday and Sunday. We're going to do what we do here on the air. We're going to do it live in person. It's not going to be broadcast. I know it's been advertised as a live podcast, but it's not. I'm not going to broadcast it live. This is only an in-person thing. So you have to go to the show to see these. I don't think anybody's going to be taping them. So anyway, today we are going to tie a different type of fly. We are going to tie a tube fly. And oh, by the way, Julia isn't here, so you probably heard Phil there. Phil Monahan's filling in for Julia today because Julia's, I don't know, Julia's busy doing something else, something more important than doing this. So Phil is going to read your questions while I'm tying. Phil and I were talking about this, and we can't understand why more people don't use tube flies for streamer type flies, because they offer so many advantages. It's such a great system. I use them a lot in salt water as well. In fact, I developed this system years ago of tying on tubes and making a mix and match system where I could have a front half of a Clauser minnow and the rear half of saddle hackles, and I could slide 2 tubes onto the line and stack them, and I could change the color of the head or the tail. I could make them really long. I could make them short. It never caught on. It never caught on. I actually did an article for Fly Fisherman magazine, and I thought that this was something that I had developed, this mix and match system, but I read recently where Lee Wolf had done it many, many years ago. So definitely it was not my my idea. But let me talk a little bit about why tubes offer an advantage. I'm going to go to the other camera so I can show you one. So this is what a tube fly looks like. And first of all, the hook is replaceable and interchangeable. So I think you can see the real advantage here in that you can take a whole bunch of tube flies and you can put them in a compartment box and store them, and the hooks don't get caught on the hooks don't get caught on the hair because there's no hook. And if your fly box happens to get wet, and you know, if you got a bunch of flies in a fly box and it gets wet and the hooks rust, you've just ruined all of your flies. You've just totally ruined all of your flies because you got a rusty hook, the fly is attached to the hook, and everything goes away. With tubes, I organize my tubes into a compartment, different compartments, and then I just take a bunch of hooks and connector tubing, which I'll show you later, and I put those in another compartment. So if I want to change hook sizes or styles, or hook gets rusty, just take it out and replace it with another hook. So here's how you do it. What you do is you take your tippet, and I'm just going to use a piece of tippet material here. And you thread your tippet through the tube. I may have to do it off camera here. So you just thread your tippet through the tube, and then you just kind of put it aside, slide it up your leader or whatever. You tie on your hook. I'm just going to tie 3 turns here. 3-turn clinch knot. This is 20 pounds, so tie on your hook, make sure it's secure. You don't even actually have to trim the tag end. And then you just pull the hook into that connector tubing like so, and away you go. You've got your fly. And the cool thing about this is that you can have a long shanked fly with a short shank hook. Short shank hooks hold better. The fish gets a lot less leverage on these things. And when you hook a fish, usually the tube just pops off and slides up the leader, so that when the fish jumps and shakes its head, you don't have that heavy fly giving it leverage to shake the hook. So they're just a great all-round system for making longer flies. And again, I don't know why more people don't do it that way. Perhaps because it's something different. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tie a steelhead fly that I learned from Hannah at Damdochax Lodge in British Columbia. And I don't even know if it has an official name. She just, before I went on a trip there, she just sent me pictures of some flies that work on that particular river. And I tied them up, and I like them so much that I use them in other steelhead rivers. I also use them. They'll catch trout. They'll catch landlocked salmon. They'll catch anything that'll really bite a streamer. It's a fairly simple fly, And you can change the colors however you want. So don't ask me about this color or that color. If you have a favorite steelhead color, then tie it in that color. Okay. Doesn't matter. It's more to show you how you construct a tube fly. And you can tie like intruders on a tube fly. You can tie any streamer that you can tie on a standard hook, you can tie on a tube with the advantages that I just talked about. How do you attach the line from the tube fly to the tippet or leader? Didn't I just show you how to do that? You thread it through the tube, Bill. You tie the hook to the leader, and then you put the hook back into the rear end of the tube fly with there's a connector tubing that I'll show you how to add on the end. Phil?
Yeah, Tom, I think the question there that I think Bill might not have been getting is that's just the tippet that comes through the fly. There's no line actually attached to the tube at all.
Oh yeah, right. The tubes don't have any. Sorry, the tubes don't have any line at all. You just thread your tippet, just like you put on any fly. Just thread your tippet through the tube and tie it to the hook, and then slide the hook up into the tube. That's how you do it. So anyway, I'm going to show you this particular pattern. Again, you can make this pattern however you want, whatever colors you want, whatever materials even. It's more to show you the concept of tying a tube fly. So I'm going to start out by showing you what I use to tie tubes on. I've got to get it ready here. So this is a little device that's sold by HMH. It's called a tube fly adapter, and you can find them in lots of places. I'm trying to do something here. There we go. I'm trying to get my old fly off there. So this thing just goes into your vise, and you have a mandrel that slides into there. It's probably easier if I show it to you in the vise itself. But these are relatively inexpensive. You can also buy tube fly vices if you want, but you could just use this adapter thing. So you just slide it in there, and you attach it to your vise. Here, I'll show you. So that's how it goes in your vise, like so. And then you actually tie on this piece of wire that slides into this thing, like so. So let me set one up and I'll show you how it works. Get this set in there. So first we have to prepare some things. So I'm going to take this wire, and you can also use a tapered steel mandrel if you want for this thing. You don't have to use this device. You could just tie it on a tapered piece of wire. Trying to get that straight. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that mandrel, and it has a hook on one end, and I'm going to take a tube, the outer tube, which is this thing, and then a liner tube. So two pieces of tubing. Don't necessarily have to do it this way. This is just one way of doing it. And I want this tube to be about 1.25 inches. So I'm going to measure it here, roughly 1.25 inches.
Hey, Tom, I think you're on the wrong camera.
Oh, thank you, Phil. There we go. So I'm going to take this heavier tube and measure it roughly 1.25 inches and cut it. So that's going to be the body of my fly. And then I'm going to take a liner tube. The reason for the liner tube is that I want to use a tungsten cone on this fly, and tungsten cones won't go over the end of this bigger tubing. And I'm going to slide that liner tubing down to where it sits flush with the bottom of the larger tube. And then I'm going to cut the liner tubing, but I'm going to leave a little nub there, about a quarter of an inch, maybe a little longer on the end. And then I'm going to take my tungsten cone that I can't find now. Where'd it go? Boy, can't find anything today. I'm a real mess here. Well, I have to grab another one from the box. So you can buy really wide diameter cones that go over the tubing, but the problem is they're not tungsten, they're not that heavy. So I like to do it with this liner tubing. And I'm just gonna put my cone, slide it onto that liner tubing, and it's a very tight fit, like so. Make sure that that is flush with the bottom. I'm going to pull it out a little bit. Kind of a fussy. Okay, so I've got that tube sticking out, the liner tube sticking out. It's flush with this end of it. And then I am going to slide this mandrel inside the liner tubing and the other tube, like so. And now I'm going to go take it, put it in my vise. And this thing just locks into that device. And the first thing I am going to do is take a lighter, and I'm going to, if I can get in here with the camera, I am going to just burn a little ridge at the end. This also helps secure those tubes together. I'm just going to hold the flame close enough to just kind of get a little bit of a ridge there. That's going to hold that connector tubing on. So that's probably good enough. I'll zoom in. You can see that little bump. You see a little bump on the end of there? Not much. In fact, I'm gonna just do that once more to give it a little bit more of an edge, a little bit more of a bump. Just be careful you don't set your tube on fire. There, that's a little better. So I've got that little bump on the end. And then you want to let this cool for a few seconds till it cools off. And then I'm just gonna change the camera angle here. And then I'm gonna jam this tube. There's a little notch in that device there. I'm going to jam this whole thing down against that notch. So I'm going to loosen that mandrel, and I'm going to pull it until that tube locks in there so that it doesn't rotate too much. And then I'm going to tighten down. So now this tube will still rotate a little bit. And sometimes it's kind of a pain when you tie on it, but we'll make it work. So now you're set up to start tying finally. And I'm going to use yellow thread because I'm putting yellow hackle in front of this thing.
Hey, Tom,
Uh-huh.
why don't you do the same thing to the front of the tube?
I will.
Aha.
I will at the end. Because I'm going to singe that liner tube up against the cone to hold it in place. But you don't need to do it now. And that's going to be covered up. That front end is going to be covered up with the cone. That's going to slide down against there. And then I'm going to singe this until it comes up against here. Okay? This is just one way of doing it. There are lots of ways to tie tubes. It's just the way I found for this particular pattern. But it'll give you an idea of how things go. And then I just see how that spins. Sometimes you have to hold that on there. And I'm just gonna, I like to go back and just cover this loosely with thread. And I'm gonna leave about 1/4 of an inch at the end, because that's where my liner tube is gonna go. But I just like to, it helps the tinsel grip this body when I wind it on there. Okay, so now I'm going to attach a piece of tinsel for my body, and I'm going to use, I'm using this Holo tinsel. It's a holographic green. I like green on the body of this particular fly. This is medium. If I had size large, I would use it because I have to wind too much, but I don't have any size large. So I'm going to make do with medium. And because this tube tends to rotate a lot, I'm going to tie in the tinsel, and I'm going to use the rotary function of my vise, which I don't normally do much tying with using a rotary function, but because I have to wind a lot of tinsel, you can see how that's spinning already. I'll fix that. So, and I can't put my bobbin in a bobbin cradle because that front end gets in the way. So I'm just going to make like 3-turn whip finish, cut off my thread, unwind this till it's back to the start. And now I'm going to use the rotary function of my vise to wind back. And you can see why I wish I had wider. Oops. I had wider tinsel because this is a pain. But I find that doing it this way prevents that tube from rotating, because it sometimes tends to rotate on the, it's rotating even now. And I'm not going to worry too much about little gaps in that tinsel because I'll cover them up when I come back through. But you know what? I'm going to try to resecure that tube. So I'm going to loosen it up and shove it back in there again. See if I can get it to hold better. I put a pair of Hackle pliers on the tinsel so it didn't unwind. All right. Let's see if that works better. Yeah. It's not rotating so much. I can put a little bit more pressure on that. So I'm just feeding the tinsel onto there, kind of guiding it rearward. This is about like watching paint dry. This is where Cheech from Fly Fish Food would go into his fast motion, but of course we can't do that when we're live. And you could use any kind of tinsel. Probably something like diamond braid would be a little bit easier than this flat tinsel that I'm using. Okay, so I'm there. I'm up at the front. And now I'm going to attach a pair of hackle pliers to my tinsel and start my thread back up again. And then wind back over the tinsel. All right, cut this thread off, cut the tinsel off. And now I'm ready to start putting my wing on there. Questions so far? No?
There's a question about what hook you're going to use, but you'll get to that.
Oh, yeah.
And someone asked, you can use this for trout?
Yeah, sure. Why not? It's just a streamer.
Yep. And then folks want to know about the hook and the leader setup, but I assume you'll get to that later.
The leader setup is the same way you'd set up any other leader. It's just a tippet. No different. Okay, so I like Arctic Fox on this wing. Arctic Fox is really durable and it's soft, very mobile in the water. You can use racoon fur. You can use just about anything. Rabbit fur is a little bit too short. That wouldn't work, but Arctic Fox is very nice. Arctic Fox or racoon. And both the upper and the lower wing on this particular pattern are black. And you wanna cut this Arctic Fox really close to the skin because it tends to be short. And if you're going to get any kind of length on your wing at all, you're going to need to use the whole bit. And I like to remove the super long hairs from the tip side, and then remove some of the fuzz from the butt side, and then helps to square this bundle off so you can tie it in. So that's about the amount that I would use on this particular fly. And then I'm going to, let's see if that's going to be long enough. Yep, it'll be long enough. And then I'm going to tie in my Arctic Fox, kind of distributing it all across the top if I can. Because this fly is kind of tied in the round. It doesn't really have a top and a bottom. It's gonna look the same no matter how it rides in the water. So there is my top wing, and then I'm going to rotate the vise and get another bunch of Arctic Fox for the other wing, the under wing or the bottom wing or the top wing or whatever it might be. There is no top or bottom. That's not quite enough. Well, maybe that will be enough. Maybe that will be enough. We'll make it enough. And now I'm going to try to distribute this over the other part. And if it doesn't go all the way around, it's no big deal. Sometimes you're going to have to hold that hook.
Tom, camera check.
Thank you. Anyways, I just tied the other bunch, so I got a bunch on top and a bunch on the bottom. Sorry about the camera check issues. And then I like to put jungle cock on this. I have jungle cock because I've had it since before it was illegal. I've had it for a long time, and you can still. There are places where you can buy jungle cock that has been grown legally, but jungle cock is a very traditional feather on Atlantic salmon or steelhead flies that imitates an eye. And there's no pragmatic reason at all for putting these jungle cock eyes on except to make the fly look pretty. I don't think it affects the effectiveness at all of this fly. But I like it on steelhead Atlantic salmon flies. And I'm going to take a little head cement, and I'm going to dip my finger in it. Oh, horror of horrors. You could do this with Sally Hansen's. And I'm just going to slide these eyes through my wet fingers. And this will strengthen and keep those eyes from splitting. And then you have to clean off, clean off your fingers before you go back to tying the fly with a little nail polish remover, acetone, or paper towel. You probably don't like the idea of rubbing your fingers with acetone, but all right, so I've cleaned my fingers off, and I'm going to grab a jungle cock eye on one side and place it right along the midpoint of the fly. Don't need many turns of thread here because a couple reasons. One is that it's already got head cement in it. The other reason is that I'm going to super glue the bejesus out of the head of this fly. So I don't need many turns here. I'm going to flip it over, put another eye along that other midpoint, just hold it in place. A few turns will do it. And now I'm going to prepare my hackle, which is a piece of schlappen. Schlappen is a long, webby saddle hackle. You can use saddle hackle. You could use a big hen hackle. You can use any hackle you want. If your head's short enough, you could even use marabou for what I'm going to do here. But you can see this schlappen feather it's long, but it's all web. It's all web. There's no non-web fibers in there. And I'm going to hold it by the tip and stroke it back. And then I'm going to cut the center out of it and cut along. The reason I'm tying this in by the tip is because it folds better. It folds back along the fly better. So I'm just gonna see that tube is rotating in there. Just gonna tie this in. And if I can get in here with this camera, I'm gonna lift up the feather, fold it so that all the fibers go to one side, so it'll stream back as best you can. And then wind it forward. I have to really reach in front of this camera here, so it's a little clumsy getting in here. And that tube keeps rotating on me too, which is sometimes a problem with tube flies. So I'm going to grab the tube and try to hold it. And you want to go right to the end of that bigger tube with this. Let's see if I can get it. That silly thing is rotating on me. Cut this off. And wind back a little bit on those hackle fibers. And next I'm going to whip finish. I'm holding the tube so it doesn't rotate in there. And you only need a couple turns here, maybe 3, because again, I'm gonna really super glue this sucker. You want to super glue this to keep the cone in place, and also to glue those 2 cones together so that one doesn't slide out. And then I'm going to apply a liberal amount of super glue in there. And then I'm going to shove my cone back over the hackle so that it covers up the windings. And now I'm going to heat the other end. And I'm going to fire this up, and I'm going to just singe that until it goes back against the cone. And that's going to hold that cone in place and give you a nice little lip to thread your tippet through. And if you're careful and you keep kind of pushing it in, it'll behave nicely for you. Let's zoom in and take a look at that. So you can see that little bead up against the fly that's going to hold that. It's going to hold that connector tube or that center tube in there. And it's also going to keep the cone from coming off the end, along with a liberal amount of super glue, and really press that cone into there. So the fly's almost done, and what you do is, before you go fishing, you'll have this tube, and you usually in your box you'll have this flexible connector tubing that's a little bit wider than the tube that you tied the fly on. It comes in various sizes. And what you want to do is just force this connector tubing over that lip in the back of the fly. This one's already been used, so it's having a little difficulty going in place. Sometimes you have to wiggle it a little bit. There it goes. And you slide that connector tubing onto that collar. And, you know, you might ask, well, why don't you just tie the connector tubing in permanently when you tie the fly in? Well, it tends to split sometimes. And so having that replaceable is nice. So you just carry a bunch of, I carry a bunch of connector tubing in my fly box, and then I just cut a little piece off when I'm ready to put a fly on. So again, talking about leaders, you would have, let's say you were let's say you were fishing this, and this fly is going to run really deep because it's got a tungsten cone. So let's say you were fishing this with a Skagit line, a full sinking Skagit line, and a short leader, maybe 4 feet of 16 pound for swinging for steelhead. So you would just take the end of your tippet, your 16 pound, and just slide it through. You don't need any other leader. All you need is a level. With a sinking line, all you need is a level leader. Slide it through. You can slide that fly up on your tippet and get it out of the way. Tie on a hook. And again, I'm only going to go 3 turns here. And I'll trim the tag end this time. Don't have to because it's going to slide up inside that connector. Actually, I don't have a tag end. And then you just hold the fly and pull your tippet up into there. And that hook will stay there when you're casting and everything. But again, when you hook a fish, this is going to separate. And then you got this nice free short shank hook playing a fish, and you don't have this big heavy fly that the fish can throw. So your hooking percentage and your landing percentage with these flies is theoretically going to be much better than if you had a long shank hook.
And what hook is that, Tom? Specific?
Oh, you can use any short shank hook, but I find you need one with a big eye. Because you want it to shove up inside that connector tubing. So I like, they make tube fly hooks. You can buy tube fly hooks, Partridge, or this is an Eric's hook. And it's a short shank hook, but you can see it's got a big wide eye and it's very sharp. So, and you want a straight eye. You don't want like an intruder hook, which has a turned up eye or turned down eye, turned up eye, I guess, on an intruder hook. It'll work, but this is a little bit goes a little bit more straight in line with the connector. So yeah, just look for, go online and look for tube fly hooks. You'll find them. And this is a size 6, which is typically what I use for steelhead. So that's the hook, Eric's tube single hook, number 6. So that is a tube fly. And again, you probably got all kinds of ideas on how you could do this. This is probably dry and cool down so that I can slide it off the mandrel. Hopefully it didn't stick to the mandrel. It did. It did. Shove that back in there. And there we go. So there's your, there's your tube fly with the tungsten cone.
Ready for some questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm dying for some questions.
What is a good substitute for jungle cock?
Well, they make fake jungle cock, which is kind of screen printed on plastic. You could starling feathers. Starling is an invasive species that you can shoot any time of year, as many as you want. Or you can actually buy starling feathers from certain fly shops, and they actually make nice soft tackles, small soft tackles. But the starling feathers it's a black feather with a white tip on them, and you could use a starling feather. But again, you don't need jungle cock. so don't even worry. If you don't have jungle cock, I would just leave it off, just because I only put it there because they look pretty and because I have jungle cock, and because it's kind of traditional. But the substitutes always look kind of tacky. So if I'm not going to put jungle cock on a fly like this or a salmon fly, I just leave it off. I won't try to use a substitute. Don't even bother.
And I think this person probably maybe came a little late, but maybe other people did it as well. Can you explain the advantage of the tube inside a tube?
Yeah, it's the tube inside the tube is because I wanted to put a tungsten cone on the front of this fly, and the tungsten cones don't have a hole big enough that you can slide it over the tube that I'm tying on. So I had to put that central tube in there so that I had something to slide the tungsten cone onto.
And Jacob, in response to the previous question, says that guinea fowl isn't a horrible substitution for jungle cock, and that there are pheasant feathers that will work as well, brown feathers with black tips.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And
sounds good.
I think that's it. There are several questions about can you use tube flies for X, and it
Yeah. I mean, they're tube flies were originally developed for Atlantic salmon fishing, probably back in maybe back in the 60s or 70s, and they've been used a lot for steelhead fishing. I think they should be used more. I see people, struggling with trailing hooks and pieces of wire and stuff like that. And if you're going to go to, because they want a short shank hook, right? But if you're going to go to that trouble, why not just tie on a tube? Because that way the fish doesn't have any leverage to work against when they jump or when they shake their head. And they're easy to store. You don't have the problems of hooks rusting, ruining your fly because your fly doesn't have a hook attached. So I just think they have all kinds of advantages. And so I think more people should experiment with tubes. I use it for trout streamers too, and I'll mix and match. I have sculpin heads and with marabou tubes that I tie separately, and then I can make a longer or a shorter sculpin depending on what size tube I thread on the hook. I fish for barracuda a lot with tubes, and I'll take maybe 4, 5, 6 tubes, nylon tubes, and I'll just tie chartreuse fish hair all around the tube, and then I'll thread a bunch of them. I'll thread a bunch of them on a piece of wire that's tied to a hook. And for barracuda, it works as well as a tube lure if you've ever fished for barracuda with tube lures, and it's a very similar thing, except it casts a hell of a lot easier with a 10 weight. So I just think they have all kinds of advantages.
Mike asked what time your tie off is with Tim at the show this weekend. I checked, 3 p.m. both days, Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you, Phil. I knew it was in the afternoon. I didn't know what time.
And Gizmo says you can clamp the tube and the mandrel in the tube fixture to stop the tube from rotating when you're tying. And you can also use brass and copper tubes.
Yes, you can buy brass and copper tubes with a nylon liner already inside them, so they don't cut your tippet. And yeah, you can get some weight with a brass or a copper tube. It's a good comment. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, sometimes I'll tie on copper tubes for the extra weight.
I think that is it for questions.
Okay, everyone. Well, I want to thank you for coming today. Thanks for the great questions. I hope that I got you thinking about ways to use tube flies in your own fishing, whether you fish for bass or pike or in salt water. They have a lot of advantages, and I think that more people should use tubes. I think they're a great way to produce a bait fish fly or an attractor fly like salmon or steelhead fly. So anyway, thank you all for coming, and hope to see you this weekend at the show. If not, I'll be back next Monday, tying a nymph. What nymph am I tying next Monday? Do you remember, Phil? I can look it up. Oh, I don't have it here. I don't have it here. It's a nymph. It's either Egan's Rainbow Warrior or another kind of similar attractor nymph. I'm doing 2 nymphs in a row for the next couple of weeks. And I see a question: can you use coffee stir straws for tubes? I think you could try it, Robert. I've never tried it, and I don't know if they'd hold up, but you could certainly try it and see. Good thing to practice on, anyways, before you buy some tubes.
Tom, next Monday is a tactical tungsten head French jig nymph.
Oh yeah.
And then the week after is the Rainbow Warrior.
Right. So one's a jig nymph, and the other one is a non-jig nymph. Not that you couldn't use both of them for either indicator fishing or Euro nymphing, but I'm tying on two different types of nymphs. So, it's coming on nymph fishing. Winter fishing in the northern hemisphere is mainly nymph fishing. Fall fishing even is mainly nymph fishing and streamers. So I thought we would tie a couple nymphs. Okay. Did I forget anything else? Philip, did I forget anything? I don't think so.
No, sir.
All right, everyone. Have a great week, and see you either next weekend or next Monday. Thanks.